Johnny Mercer, talk to me about the plight of Commonwealth veterans, and this is a cause that's really close to your heart.
Yeah, so look, foreign and Commonwealth personnel serve in our military. They're a huge part of the fabric of the British military and brings that real sort of diversity and often winning edge to what we do. But the trouble is when they leave, if they want to settle here, okay, they are currently subject to visa fees, which have exponentially increased, particularly since 2010. So unfortunately, you're in the position now where, you can leave, you've got a wife and 2 kids, you will have to pay over £10,000 for them to actually stay here. And some of those children will have been born here, right? So it's a huge burden, real worry for them.
So just casting back to why those people join the armed forces in the first place, do many of them join thinking that there's a possibility, or even more than a possibility, that they will ultimately be able to settle in the UK? Or is that not something that they generally come to until much later in their service?
Yeah, so to be fair to the military and to the government, I think it is made clear that people will have to save up for these fees. The problem is that they have gone up so much in a short period of time. So whereas it was something you perhaps didn't really think about 15 years ago or 10 years ago when you first joined, now it is a huge barrier to the point where people are leaving. I met someone last year in the Navy who was leaving and actually had to send his wife and children back to Antigua and work in the UK to get that money to get them to come over and settle. So obviously the majority of people would think that actually if you serve, for a short period of time, you should be, if you're going to die for the country, you should probably have a right to live here. And, that's what I'd like to see the government do.
And is that if you've got the funds to pay, the set of fees that you have to pay when you apply for permanent leave to remain, is that an automatic entitlement in principle for everybody who serves a certain number of years? Or
So yeah, you can apply for ILR. And after 4 or 5 years, depending on your status, and you then get indefinite leave to remain. But like I say, it is this issue of the fees, which are very high.
So we're talking about how much per person?
So you're talking, so it changes between adults and children. For a family of 4, it's about £10,500.
And for people in that position, generally in the armed forces, they would have been earning how much?
Well, anything between 21 and up to £32,000-34,000 a year. So
pretty hard to save that kind of capital.
Incredibly hard to save that capital if you've then got your sort of increased costs of having children and so on. And there are 2 sides to this where the army will say, well, you should have saved for it, and there's mechanisms to help you save for it. Unfortunately, that policy doesn't really work with the real world where people are genuinely struggling, and these aren't particularly high paid jobs. And essentially, we are getting to the point where lots and lots of our foreign and Commonwealth people cannot stay because they can't afford that £10,500.
And just to be clear, the cases that you've followed and have campaigns on behalf of, these are people that have put their lives on the line for the United Kingdom.
Oh, there's been some horrendous cases. I mean, there was the case last year that got into, was championed in the media about the individual who required surgery, but he didn't have a right to public funds. And
he required surgery as a result of, right?
No, not as a result of his service injury. He had an accident over here. He required surgery, but he wasn't entitled to have recourse to public funds. He was, hit with a huge bill. That got sorted out in the end, but actually there's lots of those whose cases don't hit the national headlines. And my concern really is for them and the worry that they inevitably have that when they come to the end of their service, they're going to have to split up their family.
And how far did you progress with this issue when you were in the Ministry of Defence? Because you were in a position to change things there.
Yeah, so I pushed as hard as I possibly could. I actually, tried to engineer a space, if you like, for the Home Office and the Ministry of Defence, who argued over this for many years as to who should actually fit the cost of this. It's a very small cost, but they're sort of arguing about it. It's meant we haven't got a solution. The Office of Veterans Affairs, I hope, could kind of step into that space, do it for serving personnel, then look at how you do it for veterans. But look, our government was a pretty painful experience, and there's a big gap, I'm afraid, between what we say in public and what we actually do for these people. And that's the gap I'm trying to close, is to make these people actually get looked after by the government in the way they should do.
And your campaign is entering another phase next week, isn't it? Can you explain what the process is? There's a bill coming up that you're hoping to attach some amendment to?
That's right. So I'm going to put down an amendment to the Immigration and Borders Bill next week, which essentially states that if you serve 5 years, you and your dependents should have your visa fees waived. So pretty basic, pretty clear. It's been Conservative Party policy for a long time. So I'm hopeful my colleagues are going to support it. I suspect the opposition will support it. Everybody knows it's the right thing to do,
yes.
But no one's quite prepared to take that step over the line and commit to it. So I will try and get the government to do that next week. I don't know what my chance of success will be, but we'll give it a good go.
I mean, these sums of money, whilst they're huge for the individuals concerned, for the government, they're absolute pennies, aren't they? I mean, we're talking, how many people are we talking a year that might want to take advantage of their right to do this?
So you're talking about a very small amount of people. The exact figures the MOD has, but it's less than 900 families a year who are looking to settle here. If you think about those who are coming here illegally at the moment, and you contrast that picture, if you look at how much money it would actually cost to resettle these people versus how much, for example, the British Legion give in their money to supporting those who are going through this process, the money isn't an issue. It's a question of actually, the department's Home Office and the MOD actually sitting down and working out who's going to do it. And, when I was in government, I was constantly kind of promised this was just around the corner, it's just around the corner, stick with it, Johnny. Well, a year later, we're still here and we haven't sorted it out. And these guys are still having to split up their families. Which
is extraordinary. I mean, it seems to me almost like a kind of Windrush situation here.
Well, it's like a lot of these issues with veterans, Isabel. So I feel that if people really knew about them, if you look at what we've just done to people going through trials in Northern Ireland, if they knew what we were doing to veterans and people who served in this country, they would genuinely be outraged by it because it's quite a small proportion of people, and veterans generally are quite service-minded and don't want to, make a big song and dance about everything. People just don't know. If they knew we were splitting up families, right, at the end of their military service because they couldn't stay in the UK because they couldn't afford the visa fees, people would be absolutely outraged.
And you did, I think, 3 tours of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Did you have any experiences fighting alongside Commonwealth armed force personnel?
Yeah, I mean, all the time when you're on service abroad, of course you do. And of course, a lot of our foreign and Commonwealth brothers and sisters lost their lives in operations. The community in the armed forces from our foreign and Commonwealth nations, they're not just kind of like the add-on that people think they are. They are fundamental to the fabric of the British Army and the Navy and the Air Force. And, that they get treated like this, it stinks, right? And, it has pretty unpleasant odours of a time gone by where we treated people differently based on their nationality. It is clearly out of keeping with where we are now in the modern armed forces. And the government needs to recognise that. And instead of just talking about how we will look after them, so on and so forth, actually do something to look after them. And this would be a really easy thing to do. Are you saying it's almost racism? No, I wouldn't say. I don't think the military's racist in any way. I think that those who serve under the flag should have the same terms and conditions, irrespective of their background. Now, you mentioned the work that you've been doing in Northern Ireland, which I think has been very painful with some of the cases that you have been involved in championing there. In one case, Dennis Hutchins, he actually passed away in the middle of court proceedings while they were ongoing. How do you feel now? That's a little bit of time has passed. How do you feel about how that was handled? I feel incredibly sad about it. I don't think he was particularly well looked after in Northern Ireland by the military, which has a statutory duty to look after him. He was clearly unwell. He was being investigated for historic allegations of... He was being investigated for firing warning shots in an incident that happened 47 years ago. So, I mean, pretty tenuous stuff. And in my view, the case was about to collapse, and I'd sat through all the prosecution evidence. But to watch his health and him deteriorate, like, it's one thing to read about it in a newspaper or see it on the TV, to actually see this, like, total abandonment of our veterans, see him in the dock and see the processes going on around him. It is the most appalling betrayal. And I defy anybody from the Prime Minister downwards to actually watch that and think that we haven't desperately failed this generation of Northern Ireland veterans. And yet the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, subsequently wrote to the family and suggested that you had not had the right motivations for your involvement in this case. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's politics. I think I think Defence Secretary would probably admit he's got a temper on him, and he sometimes says things that I'm sure upon reflection he probably feels he shouldn't. But as a soldier, to actually cross that line and suggest that to the Breed family, I think was one of the most appalling things I've seen. Yeah, basically that people like me were supporting Dennis for attention and things like that, which is all pretty sickening. But look, you just can't take these things personally, right? People do, but we're all accountable for what we do. That's a decision Ben Wallace decided to make to write that letter. That's up to him, and I will speak to him in private about that in due course.
You haven't tried to reach out to him?
No, I did go and try and find him, but he was out of the country, and I haven't been back since. So
probably a good thing for him that he was.
Well, no, I just think these things are best dealt with face to face, so everyone's very clear as to what there's no room for misunderstanding.
You said he's got a temper.
Well, look, I mean, if you write a letter like that to someone who's just lost their family member, I think you've slightly lost your perspective on the job you're trying to do and what it's like to actually see your father or grandfather go through a vexatious trial in Northern Ireland. And I know it upset the family greatly. For me, I'm big and ugly enough to take it. I'm not really bothered what Ben Wallace thinks of me, but I do think that we should treat these people with a bit more respect, and I will stand up for them.
Well, hopefully next week will be a good opportunity to bring some justice in terms of the Commonwealth veterans. Thank you very much for your time on the cause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.